God, thank you for the beginning of time and the end of time, and for all the time in between, and most of all for present time, and where you are and where we are, and where we want us all to be for the good of all that you are, all that we are, and all that you have created. And, make time together today be encouraging and deepening.
No, we don't have anything.
Amen.
So you don't have to say whether or not you did the reading, because we don't want there to be any kind of judgment. But I wanted to start out today just what did you think of the reading? What were some takeaways for you from it?
I like knowing about the period of time that we were in and what was going on at that time. That was very helpful for me.
Yeah.
It was very, really enlightening. There's one thing that caught me a little short about the not saying the Pledge of Allegiance was to me really binary thinking, that you could either say the Pledge of Allegiance or, and so it just made me read the whole history in that light, that there is no both and.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was struck by Nehru, that even though 30 years had passed, if that's when the Revelation was written in 95 around, that Nehru was 30 years before that, his impact on everybody as the church was in infancy must have been unbelievable, because 30 years, a lot of things people forget. And that was like 2 or 3 generations on it.
Yeah.
So they didn't.
Yeah.
He sounded absolutely insane.
Well, he was insane, right? So it's kind of like several other, but we've had leaders that are insane.
They kept worshiping him no matter what, and his holy days and everything like that.
But the beginning of the martyrdoms that were taking place, the persecution of Christians, now I understand a lot more about Revelation based on that, as Kathleen was saying, but it got worse and worse for the next 200 years. And hopefully they lean on it.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking that the first Christians were Jews, and they were still very much tied into the temple in Jerusalem, how that, for them, the destruction of the second temple would have been as kind of overturning what they thought was going to happen as for any Jew. So they were still who knows when it actually stopped being a sect of Judaism. But for the most part, they were still seeing themselves. Anything else that you got?
Well, mainly I noticed how women were completely left out, so you don't really know how it was for women in a way. They might have been able to get by with things others couldn't, and then most things they couldn't even get by with what everybody else could.
There was a woman in Thyatira, Jezebel.
Yeah, that's right. You think about Jezebel. Jezebel saved the church at one time, and then reneged later.
Yeah.
I think what word I want to use.
Yeah.
I appreciated some of his attempts to bring us to the present day, like who is the beast today? And that's throughout the article. Instead of trying to predict future events, how do we interpret this if we were to have it for ourselves today?
I had a similar kind of response, not to like that we're in the end times, but just like projecting what was being talked about onto today and thinking about COVID and like how that had the impact that it, not just with us, but worldwide, just the massive death by disease and the number of people who are starving and the number of people who are right now. And so it made me think about sense of pain within the experience. That's at now is very, has similarities.
I thought some of his attempts to relate it to modern day, judgments or the things that we should be doing better. Sometimes maybe question, like where he talks about how whether, how would Revelation judge, him for watering down the message by saying Jesus is the way for me, but perhaps you have another way to God. Because to me, that kind of thinking is not, it's not like an abnegation of serving or worshiping God, like allowing, like I don't see multiculturalism, including other religions, as being something that's worthy of the kind of judgment that occurs in Revelation or is the problem. So it's interesting because I get I see some of where he's coming from, some things, but then in other things, it's still, I don't know, it's too maybe fundamentalist for me. I don't know, just kind of the impression I'm getting.
Yeah, and this article appeared in Christianity Today, which was founded by Billy Graham back in the 50s. So it would come from that more, even though he's a Mennonite, the author's a Mennonite. It would come from that more, exclusionary mindset. Yeah.
And something I read thought was really funny. Is that, people they say think everything is just like it says here. Yeah, won't it be funny when they get to heaven and find Jesus as the Lamb?
Yeah, I have the outline here. I'll pass it in a minute. The quote was, "Don't get trapped with wooden literalism unless you really expect to get to heaven and find that Jesus is a sheep." I guess another thing, kind of on James' thought of binary, that his being in a more kind of peace tradition and wanting to point out the ways that we use force to exert our will on others. And that was a convenient example, like with America, a bunch of Europeans. But it's just as easily you could say, well, the beast is any oppressive force. Like I think of in the Central American context with El Salvador, and if you know who Archbishop Oscar Romero was, El Salvador's kind of like that iteration of El Salvador was, I think they called it 13 families. So it's 13 families that trace their lineage back to Spain, the colonization of what became El Salvador. And so for Romero and for the church that he represented as Archbishop, that beast would have been, that kind of oppression. And yeah, oppression is delivered by people, and people can always change. But it is a decision to be part of that, the oppression of other people, and part of how we become unbeasted, I guess, would be we pay attention to how we are the tying in or perpetuating that kind of a world that we as humans create. And that's where I feel like it can be this, it is what was written to the people of the time. So there's 7 churches in Asia Minor. And then it's also written for us as much as we pay attention to it, because we are part of the world, and the world has, we create a system, we create a human system that has impact on it. One of the things that I was helped by in the article, and also in my subsequent reading of Revelation, is when we get into the later chapters, it will start to talk about Babylon and how Babylon really represents a world system that, and that has local expression that will be overthrown because the kind of division that we have in terms of wealth and political division and even the idea of a nation state. These things are not, they're not going to be around when the idea that God has in mind comes into its fullness. And we can pay attention to them. And I also thought, I kind of remember what I was going to say now. Luther had this idea of the two kingdoms, the kingdom of this world and the kingdom of God. And we need to pay attention to both of those because we are citizens of both of those kingdoms. So we can say the Pledge of Allegiance because we want to be part of that. I mean, in my opinion, because we want to be part of that. We want to be citizens of this thing called a nation. And we want that nation to be better. And so by saying the Pledge of Allegiance, we're saying we want to improve the community that we're a part of. But then also as Christians, we're part of the kingdom of God. So that second kingdom, which our ultimate loyalty is to, but these things are, we have dual citizenry, we have two passports. You know. So
I thought of that in terms
yeah.
of Christian nationalism. I mean, that's really coming to my mind. It's hard to see critique of our own nation. And then when people begin to use Christian names and symbols for America, it gets real scary.
Any other comments on the article?
I thought.
Yeah.
I was really interested in and curious to hear more about the apocalyptic writings that related to John. You know, like were they written around the same time or earlier? How similar are they? How much do we know about what they were saying that can clue us into what John was saying? I think, you know, him bringing that up and some of the mentioning of it was very interesting. Something I'm really curious about now.
I have a handout I'll give next week that actually lists some of those. And it's not just, at least the parts of the Hebrew and Christian scriptures that are considered apocalyptic. But yeah, there's a whole literature in Jewish scripture that, and also if you look at the Deuterocanonical, the books between the two sets of books, there's some apocalyptic content there too.
Was there apocalyptic literature? Was the genre known outside of the Christian and Jewish tradition?
There's apocalyptic literature in Hinduism and even in Islam, there is Buddhism. So it's I think it's the balance that every faith feels with.
And didn't the animal, what do you call it, animistic, no, but an earlier religion that was based on everything natural, I think they had it too.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what was the 2012 thing? The Mayan calendar was ending in
Oh,
2022.
millennial.
So, what there's a movie made about it. So yeah, I think it is prevalent in other cultures as well. The only other thing I'd say about the article is this idea of the New Jerusalem breaking in. Like that's the vision. That's where we're headed, and that in that sense, the end times have already occurred because we've been given a vision of what the world could be like, and so as much as we live into that idea of where we're headed, then everything's already happened. And that's where God time is not our time. God is not on a timeline. God transcends the timeline. And so how do we as communities become more reflective of that New Jerusalem vision? Where there's enough for everybody.
And didn't
And
people
everybody-
invent time? People invented time.
Oh, yeah, for
Wasn't-
sure. Yeah.
It wasn't, they didn't, people used didn't used to go by time
Uh-huh.
like we do.
Yeah, more just by the seasons. Instead of time, until
And,
the religious orders started praying the hours. That's one way the time came to be. Well, what about the first 3 chapters of Revelation? Any reflections on those?
I kind of thought it was interesting that John seemed to know a lot about the churches. And each one of them starts out with, well, I know you're trying to do good, but I got these things that are really a problem you need to fix.
Yeah.
And it just sort of a interesting, we like you, but you could do better.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
There were more out of hand churches than there were good churches. There were a couple that he praised more, that he didn't chastise. But those he did, he chastised more.
Yeah.
My favorite city is Smyrna, because it's Izmir today in Turkey. That's where St. Nicholas comes from.
Okay.
And it's a great city. It still is. And I guess they're all pretty great. But I was interested in what the cities are today, and at one time I wanted to visit all 7.
Okay.
But I haven't.
Yeah, but they're still existing.
Yeah, they're all cities today. Yeah.
I wonder why Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is called Philadelphia. You wonder.
Did it come from that?
Yeah. Yes.
Did it?
It's
Okay.
a city of brotherly love is what it's supposed to be.
Right. That's what Philadelphia is.
And that was one of the only more positive of the cities.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that one, and I haven't looked this back up, but seems like they were the people that didn't stand up for things. And so in a way, that's just as bad as anybody else.
Yeah.
They didn't do that much, but they also didn't stand up against it.
Do we have people online today?
A lot.
Yep, great. Does anybody online have anything to add on the article or the first 3 chapters of Revelation? Charlotte. You're muted, Charlotte.
You're muted, Charlotte, you're muted.
Okay, there we go. I was reminded of 2 things in the article for sure. There's also from another book I've been reading about the very early church. There came to be quite a concept of the noble death, and this martyrdom business that the article was talking about. It glorifies noble deaths. And that also comes from some of the earlier cultures. And the other thing, I don't know if it's out of place to mention it, but when you read all of those, when you read those prayers and paeans that people said to the Roman emperors, I mean, it makes you cringe. It sounds just so blasphemous. At the same time, you can really understand how the Nicene Creed ended up with the only Son of God. And if you come to the present day, we just don't get that history of affirming Jesus as the only Son of God, because the emperors were all sons of God. Anyway, those were just 2 thoughts I had.
Yeah, and that one of the successors of those emperors is the one who brought the bishops together to read.
Yeah. Yeah. Also ironic, isn't it?
Well, anything else about those? Okay, let's go to some artwork. Lori, can you show that?
Yeah, you'll have to wait a second while I get that up. And talk about something else.
Well, in the meantime, actually, I'll show this piece of art and Felicia can tell you about it.
This was made by my grandmother. She was an artist. And this is enamel on copper. And you may have remembered this from is it the first chapter of Revelation?
Yeah, it's Revelation 1:12-16.
I turned around to see the voice that was speaking to me. And when I turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And among the lampstands was someone like a son of man, dressed in a robe reaching down to his feet and with a golden sash around his chest. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like blazing fire. His feet were like bronze glowing in the furnace, and his voice was like the sound of rushing waters. In his right hand, he held 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp double-edged sword. His face was like the sun shining in all its brilliance.
Would you all mind putting that a little closer to the camera?
This grandmother was an evangelical.
She was.
Ruth Stone, and she did a lot. This was kind of unique for all of her other pieces, but she did a lot on canvas. And some, did she do any sculpture or some different,
Her son did sculpture, but I
Yeah.
don't know that she did.
a few different materials that she painted on. So, she also did this one of, it's on the wall in her house. It's Nebuchadnezzar, the writing on the wall and the dream. Doesn't look like anything. Doesn't look like anything real language.
7 lamps on the lampstand look like a menorah, except that the
Yes.
menorah has 8. And so this is the 7 from Revelation.
That is
7
a
cities.
It's beautiful. It is very
That
lovely.
Color.
Felicia doesn't like the frame.
I think it's fine.
No secrets.
can always reframe it.
No secrets.
Yeah, really.
Read Madison.
But it's cool. It's cool that it's on copper. So.
Yeah, it is.
So this one is St. John at Patmos by Gustave Doré. And I don't know the backstory I know the backstory of Ruth Stone, but not of Gustave Doré. But just that was one representation. I searched after we ended our time last week, and there were a few of St. John on Patmos. So you can see him there on an island and writing stuff.
I meant to look up where Patmos was. Where is it?
I don't know where it is. I mean, my guess is it's,
I don't know. Asia
yeah, where's Asia Minor?
Minor is Turkey.
Turkey, so it'd probably be off the coast of Turkey.
And I looked it up, in the Bible, or the maps.
Illustrated Bible.
Yes, and Patmos is there,
Yeah, okay.
Along the coast of Turkey,
yeah.
because that was all Greek.
Yeah. And then the next one, Christ at Heart's Door. This is the one that I mentioned last week that I was so familiar with, and I had a little card of it that I had in the wallet when I was a child growing up.
My grandparents had a big one on the wall.
Really? Yeah.
And this is the door without a door handle. Has to be open from the inside.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so it's, listen, I am standing at the door knocking. If you hear my voice and open the door, I will come into you and eat with you and you with me. So that's Revelation 3:20. And I also found out that this artist, Warner Salmon, all of his stuff is at Anderson University. They own it all. So
That's the Church of God I grew up in.
Indiana.
Okay.
Indiana.
Anderson, Indiana.
I can remember them teaching us that this door didn't have the handle. I thought, that's ridiculous. God doesn't need a door handle. He can just keep the door open. Or walk through it or something.
And he painted in the mid 20th century. So but ended up leaving all this stuff at Anderson University.
I grew up in a Methodist church, and there were a lot of those, except it was a different
Mm,
It was a different painting.
Yeah.
But it was the same.
Right.
thought.
But it was Christ knocking on the door.
And then this next one by William Holman Hung is the same,
Yes,
same verse.
yes, that's.
And if you
That
want
was his
to
crown there.
bring anything to the group next week or the week following, feel free to just email it to Lori and she can add them to the showing. And actually, what the artists are representing certain verses, so maybe a chapter or verse, what have you. So I do have 4, I think, for each week. But if you happen to see any others, feel free to bring them along or send them along.
I did notice one other thing I wanted to point out. We were taught in seminary that a certain percentage, very high, like 89 or 92% of the Book of Common Prayer is directly from Scripture. And so in the 2nd chapter of Revelation, it says, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches." And that's the conclusion that we use. We'll hear what the Spirit says to God's people. So anyway, that was interesting to me. And then that phrase that you remember, did you all get this growing up, that you can't be lukewarm or God will spew you out of his mouth? And I didn't realize that was from Revelation. You different?
The Laodiceans.
Yes, yes.
I found Patmos.
You found Patmos?
Yeah.
Can you show where it is? Or-
It's the tiniest little island you can imagine,
Okay,
right there.
yeah.
Right off the coast of Turkey.
They sent them to a place where there was nothing on it to
Uh-huh.
survive,
Okay,
basically.
yeah. Well, I wanted to go back to last week, assuming there's no other comments on all that. And I just want to thank Lori for your bringing up this, how that made you feel, what I said about fear being a good justifier. And I just thought about that and realized that, I guess the way I would put it now is, that's the way I was brought to a moment of decision, which is really important in the church version of the church that I grew up in. So like having a conversion experience, like that's the main thing. You have to have a conversion experience, and that's like an intellectual thing, and that's the main thing. And now as I reflect on that, I was thinking, yeah, that can be redeemed, but that's not the way it should be. There has to be a kind of consistency between means and ends. And what I write here is you can't help people live in love by trying to make them afraid. If we want the world to be characterized by love and generosity and empathy and service, we don't get to those things by the opposite of those things, like stinginess and making people do things for themselves and hate. There has to be consistency with means and ends. And another example that I'm familiar with from that is thinking about, like, if you're familiar with liberation theology, this idea of liberation is important. I mean, that's what the Bible is about. It's a story of liberation from Moses and the Israelites on. And the way that we go about liberation can't be through violence. If we achieve liberation by violence, then there will be more violence. Eventually, the way to achieve liberation is, and that doesn't mean violence isn't used, but we can't achieve liberation and freedom through violence if we want a world that's characterized by peace. So, but what were you gonna say?
Well, I was just gonna say 2 things. One is salvation. You have to find it,
Mhm.
not be, being afraid
Yeah,
that you don't.
yeah.
The other is, I'm thinking of a concept all through this, is the concept of community.
Mhm. Yeah.
And community starts at the basic level,
Mhm.
where you live.
Yeah.
And how you treat people.
Yeah.
And that that seems to go all the way up through the whole world.
Mm.
And violence is just directly opposite.
Mm.
Because the violence is against somebody else,
Right, right.
and that's
Right.
so wrong.
Yeah.
So counterproductive.
Mhm. Yeah, and God's idea of community is just an ever expanding circle. You know, the table gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
That's what civilization is all about.
Mhm. Yeah,
Otherwise, you don't have it.
and that said, I mean, we live in a violent world, and there's a need for the threat of violence. Unfortunately, our police officers offer it to us every day. They are willing to use force, violent force, to protect us from those who may do us harm. And maybe this would be for a future time. Another series that we did at St. Mary Magdalene was on one on just war. That could be an interesting topic of conversation. But just to say thanks for that, Lori, and it's such an important principle that the ends that we're achieving need to be consistent with the means that we're using to try to get to those ends. So on your outline, and for those that are online, if you want to access the outline, actually the link, if you still have it, the link in the email. If you click on that, the outline is in the week 2 folder on the Google Drive. And I just wanted to go through a few other things that I think about for this particular session about historical context. That certainly the 2 audiences for the book of Revelation, the known for sure, are those 7 churches: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. These were all pastorally founded, perhaps by the author, and that this book is a circulating pastoral letter to these churches, though one with the imagery of Daniel rather than Paul's theological thinking. So we talked about that last week, and that's made clear in the article. But then it's also, and who knows if the author knew this would be around, 2,000 years later. But it's also a message and a pastoral letter for our own time. And there are some that have speculated that and this is certainly beyond the thinking of the first author, but that the 7 churches are like 7 periods of the life of the church, and that we are, somewhere along one of those continuums. And the people that want this to be the handbook for the end times, we're going to be in the 7th period, where we're all lukewarm. So, but who knows? Which one do you like best of the 7? That's the period we're in. Maybe we're in the Philadelphia period.
Not in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, we're not.
Yeah, I lived in Philadelphia for 2 years. The joke around there was, it's the city of brotherly shove. It's the city of brotherly love.
They're the ones that throw snowballs and Santa Claus in the stadium.
And then the next section there is the messages, just a quick summary of each. The message to Ephesus: you have abandoned your first love. The message to Smyrna: you are about to suffer. The message to Pergamum: you hold the false teaching. The message to Thyatira: you tolerate Jezebel, a woman engaging in encouraging immorality. The message to Sardis: you need to wake up and perfect your works. The message to Philadelphia: you will be kept from the hour of trial because of faithfulness. And then the message to Laodicea: you are lukewarm in faith and are about to be spit out. So which one of those do you like the best? What's that?
Thyatira.
Is that how it's pronounced? Thyatira. Okay.
Thyatira. It still exists. It's on the coast of Lebanon, called
Okay.
Tyre today, Tire. And that's where the Carthaginians came from in the Punic Wars, and they all were Phoenicians, and that's where they landed on the coast of North Africa.
I'll try to find a map that we can show next week that has all the location of
The present day
churches.
map, you mean?
What's that?
the present day.
Yeah, present day. So we can see what was the general vicinity that these churches were.
I'll bet John's been in every one of them.
I've been to 4, not 7.
And then here's for conversation. So what is the word for St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Fort Collins, Colorado? So imagine a founding or longtime priest of the parish, and who we can assume has some ongoing knowledge of the state of the congregation, were to write us a pastoral letter. What would she or he be encouraged by? What flaws would be noted? What would be encouraged? What would be admonished? And I came up with this little exercise when I did it the first time because they were on their second minister. It was Connie Delzell was the founding pastor. And I knew her well because that's where I got confirmed, was in St. Andrews, Denver, where she moved to after St. Mary Magdalene. And then, now the church is not her church anymore, but she still knew about it. So does that provoke any thoughts? Like what would be said to St. Paul's? What would be the pastoral letter to St. Paul's?
Wow.
We should start with our pastor. What is he?
She hasn't been here that
Yeah,
long.
there's an
though.
exercise for
Who are
next
you?
week. Write a letter of admonishment.
And there's a lot of admonishment in these.
Yeah. Yeah, not so much, I think,
Encouragement.
exactly, try to point out the good things, but
Yeah, if we could have, if you're running with me, Jesus author wrote the letter, that would be very interesting.
Malcolm Boyd.
Are you running? Yeah, Malcolm Boyd.
mhm.
He was basically the one that started it.
He was very justice oriented.
Mhm.
He was a priest who I know gave Matthew Shepherd last rites.
No,
That was
No,
Bacon.
Bacon.
Okay.
yeah, Father Bacon was here a long time. He would have been.
32 years.
He wrote the book, like Nancy was saying, Area Nothing But Jesus. And he left
Malcolm Boyd, yeah.
his work here to become a freedom writer.
In Alabama.
That's right.
Mhm.
So maybe that's one thing that would be said. There was an earlier time where people who were outside that weren't at the table were encouraged, invited to come to the table because of the work of welcoming people who are LGBTQ plus. That would be perhaps you've continued in that. Good job.
But
Yeah, they would have to write about the other part.
Well, as an outsider, I think you've been very persistent as a congregation in staying a congregation. When this building was sold, you looked at 100 properties, and nothing worked out. But I think a lot of churches would have just said, "Well, we'll do something else." But there was this persistence to find a space, to keep being a community. And then also a lot of flexibility in living into that space with 2 other communities. And I've heard some stories about that.
Mhm.
in the past.
that was our stewardship last year, the steadfast and nimble defines this congregation. to
Yeah.
me.
Also welcome, I think that's the thing I've heard most from people who come is you're such a welcoming congregation, so friendly, you make sure that we're included, everybody talks to us,
I just spoke to a lady today who has come to St. Paul many times, Joanna. And she was telling me that she loves our mission of being with the 3 churches, having the 3 churches meet together, how all of that is so encouraging for her, that she loves coming here because of that. And so I think there are a lot of people, even though it's not been maybe easy, our determination to help make that work. It is good for our community to see it. Not only good for us, but good for other people to see that we can do that.
I think, as a point of interest, Lynn, Andrea mentioned earlier that she was from the Methodist background. I believe. Wasn't that John Wesley? Based based on his teachings. And our first hymn today, Lo, the love of God is sending, written by John Wesley. So we
I
are
read a lot of our hymns.
even more.
They were, the Wesleys were confirmed, were priests in the Anglican Church. They never left the Anglican Church.
Right.
They just branched out to do a little bit more outreach as Methodists.
What else we can say, Greg?
I was just gonna comment on the artwork that Alicia's mother created. Unless it's changed, I've done some enamel work way in the past on copper. And one uses basically a ground glass of various colors and puts it on the cover, and then you fire it under extreme heat. And there's quite a bit of artwork, sort of imagination.
Yes.
He's involved in that. What a fascinating piece of inspired work. Shared.
And along the same lines, the first image that you showed is that you sent to us is a woodcut. And so that also is very intricate and beautiful way of working. Doesn't show up oftentimes very well in reproductions, but it's a gorgeous process.
Anyone online, any thoughts about what would a former pastor have to say to St. Paul's Episcopal Church, Fort Collins?
Lyle, this is Charlotte. I'm struck by, well, the first message to Ephesus was they abandoned their first love. And one of the things that has just always been said about St. Paul's is we have certain things in our DNA from the beginning, and we have not abandoned that. The welcoming, the concern for social justice, etc. And I guess we went through a kind of suffering period, selling the old building and moving over to Trinity. And we certainly have a community of brotherly love. So I really see all those things as on the positive side compared to John of Patmos's message.
Great. Any other, thanks, Charlotte. Any other online thoughts? Go ahead.
I'm not online,
Sure.
obviously,
Yeah.
but I just want to remember Father Cano. Again, this was somebody who was not from this country, but who came and helped people find faith during a very difficult time. And we were lucky enough to have him actually be at St. Paul's for a number of years. And I want to think about the qualities of the people that have been our leaders, who have been leading the way, and those qualities that endure in the life of St. Paul's.
Yeah.
And so certainly patience would be one of them, perseverance. And, you know, we as a group can think of those qualities that are important in organizations that are ongoing, that succeed.
Yeah.
I'd also like to mention that psychologists say that people are more apt to take heed and be more aware of times when there's fear, when people are threatened, when they see bad things happen, they're more apt to remember those things than the good things. So I think it's important to emphasize and to continually remind people of the good things that exist in an institution that is succeeding.
But of course, in a church, a lot of people just leave and you don't really even know why they leave. And you might not even attempt to find out. And I mean, so it's not like, I mean, a church can just change completely because a lot of people leave.
Yeah.
So you don't really know, if you haven't been there and known why they left, you don't know if they left for something bad we did or something good we did.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where that first love is so important, that people know what the community is founded on and maintaining that. And not that that doesn't change over time, how that first love is kind of exercised upon, you know, what that looks like in terms of activity, but holding to the first love. And we can't, if we've done that, sometimes people leave out the front door, sometimes people leave out the back.
Yeah.
Or feet first.
Right.
Thank you, Lori.
Well, the one thing, and this will bridge to the last section here, that I would say is, and it's not that we aren't doing that at St. Paul's, where Felicia is now, or when we were at St. Bridget, or St. Aaron Nigel, and our other congregations, but we're in such a time of transition. Like, it's time to take risks. It's time to take risks because, and you know, calculated risks and educated risks and smart risks and all those kinds of things. But I don't just speak for St. Paul's or my perception of St. Paul's, but also for my own organization where I work, United Way Wall County. People don't know what United Way does, but it's so important what United Way does in local communities, but people don't know what it does. And if it's going to be around 10, 20 years from now, it's going to have to take some risks. And that's the case for a lot of organizations that have been around for a while, trying to make a shift, you know, kind of figure out how we exercise our mission in the world, for the sake of where the world is heading, and also encouraging others to be part of these centers of energy that are doing good work and are being a vital presence in the world. And what I wanted to do was just bridge that to this idea. And who's familiar with this book with Phyllis Tippett, The Great Emergence? Okay, there you go. Yeah. Are you reading it right now?
I heard her speak about this, and so,
Yeah.
you know, again, this goes back a number of years, but I'm cleaning my library out. So
Okay.
I just happened to pull it out.
So what's the idea of the book?
Well,
What did she
the
present?
idea of the book is obviously time has something to do with it. Every 500 years, there is a change, and
Yeah.
people have to rummage around, you know, the rummage sale, and find out what are the core messages, what are the core things that you want to continue with. I'm not going to do a great job of remembering, because
Yeah.
it was a number of years ago that she spoke, but she was very convincing that we were at that time when things were definitely changing, and we had to go out in different ways. We had to appeal to people in different ways. And again, but show what our strengths are to
Yeah.
people in order to bring them back in.
Yeah.
That mean, you please add to it, because
No,
I'm sure
just-
that's just a partial.
Yeah, every 500 years, she says there's a rummage sale. And so the first 500 years was right at the beginning of the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, or whatever you call it. And then the next 500 years was when the Eastern and the Western church split. Then the next 500 years was the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, and the Catholic Counter-Reformation. So, and now we're at that 500-year epoch again. And it's this time of great change, you know, not just for the church, but it's also for culture and the way we communicate and our understanding of time. You know, now everything happens 24 hours a day, and so social media. So we're at this moment of we need to do the rummage. What are we going to hold on to, and what are we going to let go of, and what will we be like 50 years from now?
Yeah, I'm afraid, I mean, I don't know that I fear it, but I think that we will have changed much more often now than 500 years.
Yeah.
every, like, 75 years. maybe.
Right. Well, we can put our rummage sale online, so we can be selling stuff 24/7. Facebook Marketplace.
I'm thinking how people respond to change, and there's so much right now. Some people are just petrified. They don't want more things to change, and they're digging in. And then there are others who see, oh my gosh, this could be a breath of fresh air. Let's let some of these things go. And there's that balance of trying to address the needs of all people. It's hard to do.
Yeah, it's like-
Bishop of our diocese here, not this year, but last year's convention theme was, this is our Oregon Trail moment. We loaded Aunt May's piano on the wagon in St. Louis and took our time getting here, and it's now beginning of December, snow, cold. We have children who are hungry.
Yeah.
We have children who are cold. It's time to chop up Aunt May's piano.
Right.
And it's a little, what we hear from Brian McLaren, our great spiritual migration.
Yeah. Right.
It's a lot what we hear from Brian McLaren.
Well, and then the city of Fort Collins is in a huge embroil right now. Some people want to keep things the way they are, continually raising prices of houses, continually having more and more homeless people and not doing anything about it. Continually cutting down trees to build bigger and bigger homes, things like that. And then the city is wanting to have a lot more affordable homes, although they haven't mentioned anything about homeless so much. But and people are kind of embroiled in that.
That's every city in the United States of America right now.
It's
That is
quite a few of
national
them, yeah,
problem.
because the millionaires have so much money, they buy up all the land.
Well, there's no county in the United States of America where a family can live on minimum wage and afford housing. So it's Kansas, Hawaii, Alabama.
Yeah.
We're housing shortage.
Even if, if we went to Mississippi, we could buy a house there, but the people that live there can't.
Well, and then the other language I'd offer is Bonhoeffer. And if you're familiar with the letters and papers from prison, it was what he wrote while he was in prison, waiting, to see what would happen to himself, be martyred. But, he was very certain of himself 10 years earlier in his outlook. But then once he saw how the Reich Church, the national church, caved to Hitler, he realized, we're living in a new time. And so his lots more language than this, but one of his key phrases from this period is religionless Christianity. How do we practice discipleship beyond the forms of religion? And that doesn't mean we don't have forms, but it means that the forms have to lead to the formation of a person that is not what he was thinking, which is all about power and exclusion rather than inclusion. And so if you haven't read Bonhoeffer lately, or haven't ever read from this period, I'd be happy to make some recommendations, or just pick up letters and papers, read it here. Well, so that's it for this week. The things to do for next week, and I hope you get a sense of where I'm going with this. I really don't want to say it. I've said a fair bit, but I want this to be a conversation. And so doing the reading for the weeks is really important for that. Thank you for doing that. Next week, what we're going to do is look at Revelation so this was a historical perspective. And next week, we want to look at it from more of a devotional perspective. So how do we see Revelation as a tool for helping us to be different kinds of people? And that's back to the article for today. When I think about the overthrow of Babylon, and Babylon is a way that the world works, and I know that I participate in that way that the world works. that makes me want to become a different kind of person. So that's the idea of this outlook. And this is actually an introduction from a study Bible that it's the Redavari Spiritual Formation Bible. I used to work with the organization Redavari. And so it's a study Bible that looks at the whole of the Bible from more of a devotional perspective. And then this is a example. When Felicia read this to me yesterday, I thought of this as an example of how a person has seen the book of Revelation as a tool for Christian formation or spiritual formation. So it's like a little example of the devotional perspective. So if you could read those two, and then also read Revelation chapters 4 to 11, and we'll start, getting even more so into the vivid imagery.
We have artwork. right?
Yes, you have artwork, bring it or email it to Lauren and she can, or to me, or to Felicia. One of us, we can add it to the small holding of digital art. Anything else for today?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good reflections, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for what you said.
Interesting. Anybody like to borrow this or have this?
And I actually have, this was on my bookshelf, it's the Green Bible.
That's what she had last week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a better edition. You have a better.
I
cover.
know. I know. It's just sitting on my shelf. If anyone would like it, feel free.
The Green Bible. I
Would
would
you
like
like
the
it?
Green Bible.
It was fun. And the introductions are great. There's so many terrific writers in the very beginning. Desmond Tutu.
Oh, yeah, good.
That's a great part. It's very rich.
Yeah, I like the idea.
But I
of
have
the
left
Green
of mine.
Green God. Green Bible.
Well, we'll see you next week and we're starting at 9.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We have a different time.
Joint service.
The joint service.
And
And should I bring donuts?
no,
Will
absolutely
there be
not.
coffee and donuts?
There'll be coffee.
The coffee's made, so I'll bring something. It won't be bacon.
We hear your.
Alicia, I think he's a keeper.
Maybe I'll bring some bagels. I mean, it's all sugar. Bagels, donuts, whatever.
beaters.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a good week.
Thank you.
You as well.
Thank you, Lyle. Sherry, I had a question. Meeting this morning.